But we have Shihan with us, we have Andrew, we have Lewis, we have Eric. We have the guys. James is not going to be here today. He's at a wedding. Of course he is. Needs to prioritize his time. We feel a little bit sad about that, but that's all good. But the first subject we're going to discuss today is going to be my fellow friend Shihan, who has made a pretty good traction site, pretty good popular site. I saw like was it 2,000 likes or 1,000 likes on LinkedIn?
Yeah, a lot of reactions. All the social, yeah, all the socials actually, and like good traffic building up to the site, even as we speak. So um, yeah. So I can start on that. So that's IntuneMaps.com started as IntuneMaps.tech, which actually didn't go really well with the domain due to I don't know, GoDaddy didn't like the Canva, so ended up with IntuneMaps.com. So ideally I wanted to start I was thinking about how can I help the community or anyone who's starting with Intune or device management, where to go, where to open the learn map sorry the learn documents. There
Mm.
are plenty of documents, plenty of good guides out there, but where to start from? So I thought maybe I'll give some sort of an infographic, a clickable infographic, so they can just click on that, look at the relevant learn page. So that's how that was the thought process behind intunemaps.com, and also how everything connects. For an example, assignments, a user device, and then it can go to filters, something like that. And what about the policies related to apps? What sort of apps that you can do, and also how the security portion connects to the Intune portal, and how it really works. What's the thought process again behind planning of those products and licensing as well. And also, I did add something related to the troubleshooting as well. There are good guides and tools in GitHub that's basically going with PowerShell tools and everything. So I added those in the troubleshooting area, and also resources like what's coming up in Intune. As you know, there's a learn page behind that covers everything that comes in that month, for an example. So I thought maybe I'll add those as well. So that's basically a one-stop shop for all Intune stuff. Um, so that's Intune Maps. And I was thinking going one step forward, maybe I'll do something related to the templates as well. That's coming up in the future, maybe in coming few days. So it's still an infographic, but it's basically a clickable infographic that goes to all the templates that we can see in Intune, and basically it just redirects into a learn page on how and why that you need to create that template in order to assign it to a user or to a device. Um, so I created this by using Canva. It's really, all the tools are there. I just need to drag and drop and create your links and everything. It's very, very quick. And I think I did this yeah, I went through a few iterations, but I think it took probably 2 weeks to come up with this, the end product. Yeah,
Okay, so you designed it
the
yourself
Intune
as well
Maps
with the
by you.
colors and all of that.
Yeah, I thought maybe I'll give, a bit of a gradient
Okay.
as well, and not a black background, but, something, closer to black sort of thing, bit eye-catching. Yeah.
Okay. And I know like all the other guys here, they also work a lot with endpoint management. So what do you guys think about the layout?
Are there any plans to add Android, iOS, macOS on there?
Yes. So I thought maybe I'll start with the Windows first, and then I'll move on to the Windows, sorry, the other OSs as well. Yeah, iOS can be something related to Linux as well, because they got some Linux portions at the moment, as well as Mac OS. So yeah, so those are like in the works, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty slick, and I'm one who is in the endpoint management world less. So I mean, to me, when I have to sort of work in there, I mean, I think this would be awesome just for myself, let alone everyone else, to kind of help figure out where I need to go. So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
saw
Thank
the
you.
buttons
And I
are
think,
you're
yeah,
able to click on the buttons.
yeah,
yes. So yeah, all the buttons are clickable. So that will go on to a learn page.
I think people will appreciate the visual layout
yeah,
rather than just a list of URLs
Yeah.
that those have already existed, right?
Exactly.
There are community sites that will list all of the URLs, but some people learn better by seeing where the relationships are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, I got some good reactions and good comments from like all the socials as well, saying, okay, this is something that they were looking from like Microsoft. But yeah, I think Microsoft recently published the high level architecture for Intune, which is really nice as well. And I think when Merrill also had a mind map for Azure AD, and he gave me a shout out for this page as well. Yeah. Yeah, bit of a coincidence. He said that he was thinking of the same for Azure AD stuff, but yeah, this came out pretty much at the same time.
Like I gotta say that every time I go up and look stuff up, it's text on text on text, right? So this one is gonna like I could imagine when I was starting reading all the learn pages, it's just like as I just said, it's just text on text on text. But if I had this one on the side next to me, under my understanding of things, instead of like just demo, yes, you can demo stuff and you can learn about it, how it actually works. But if you have this page on next to you, you can connect the dots a lot more easier, right? And understand things maybe faster. So I think this one is awesome, Shihan.
Yeah.
It's a great job.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I like the colors.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a lot of times I think like if you're used to docs or learn now, right? Like you maybe know where to go, but I think just again, like if you're not sure where to go, like seeing it broken out like this is just is awesome. So, and sometimes you don't know like the Microsoft name for things, so seeing like everything grouped under policies or apps, right? It kind of gives you a sense of like, oh, like this is kind of refining things. It's excellent work here.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it will look different in a year's time as well as you improve it and add more to it and rearrange it.
Yeah. When they rename Intune again.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Why not? Yeah.
Okay, so let's hop on to the next. Yeah, no. By the way, I have in the button. I have the Intune maps. I'm the guy on the buttons today, so that's why it's in the bottom. The link is in the bottom on the screen. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, so let's hop over to the next subject. That is going to be EricOnIdentity, or is it Eric?
EricOnIdentity. Everyone knows. Well, most people know Krebs on security, so I'm like, I'll be EricOnIdentity. Not as famous as Brian Krebs yet, but So
Eric, did you also get a new logo?
Yeah. So my wonderful fiance, as mentioned before we started recording, she's a graphic designer, web developer, and she kind of, I felt like the site was a bit stale, so she kind of came up with a lot of the fanciness for the site here. So that's all kudos to her. So
you also have a gradient in the back.
Yeah. And I have more things I keep adding to the site. I was managing a event for the Azure Global this past month, and man, I have not blogged in like a month and a half between that and travel, and I miss it. But so I mean, this post that you have up, the Azure AD app registrations and enterprise applications definitive guide. It's a mouthful. But
it is. You made a long post.
Yeah. No, it's tough. I think like the Microsoft Learn docs, do an all right job of kind of separating out what enterprise apps and app registrations are, and even in the title, I call them enterprise apps, but there's many things I feel like going on here right now. Your enterprise apps are really just service principles in Azure AD. But when people go to the portal and you see enterprise apps and they think this is something different, and then when you see service principal and they're like, well, I don't know what this is. And at the same time, app registrations, right? A lot of times you sort of get questions around like, well, what is the difference between an app registration and an enterprise app? And I sort of had the knowledge, I felt like in my head, but many times when I try to explain it, I feel like I kind of fall short in, as I sometimes can just ramble when I'm speaking to folks. So I really wanted to just write it all down and also call out some other resources. So like John Seville, who I don't know how he has time to make videos because he's got a new one like every 5 seconds, but he has some excellent videos on this as well. And also Marilee Turskak, and I'm probably butchering her last name there. She has another article that's similar. There's some other folks as well that have some pretty decent articles, I'd say, sort of in one area or the other. And I was just trying to bring it all together as this very long, post. And we get into multi-tenant versus single-tenant app registrations and how you're going to have a service principal that relates to them. And also, interestingly, then you can get into that you can either set a secret or certificate pair on either an app registration or a service principal, and kind of what is the difference, where do they overlap, and so on. So yeah, I think spent maybe 8 hours after going through it a few times writing this one. So it was a long article.
Yeah, it's long, but it's you got all the info in there. I did read it. I think it took me it took me some time, but because yes, it is a big subject because it's probably misunderstood for many. App registrations, enterprise applications, as you said, service principal names, but they're all connected, right? In a way.
Yeah. And of course, then I also get hung up on, I make these graphics and then I'm like, well, I wish they'd look better. And you also, I don't know, me personally, I can waste a bunch of time when I'm writing an article, just stuck in refinement. But
I know the feeling when you have it inside your head and you have mapped it out and you want to explain it to other people. The best thing to explain it is going in and writing a blog post.
Yep, absolutely.
So can you tell me the 3 key takeaways from your blog post? Or 2 or 1?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, I guess hopefully if you survive reading it, that you have a better understanding of service principles against app registrations, and maybe in there the other takeaway is how if you're looking at a multi-tenant app registration, right, kind of understanding how OAuth and OpenID Connect work in here. And honestly, I don't recall where I may call those bits out, but right, like even in watching, because I watched John's video just as I was doing this as well, and he goes on and basically explains a lot of like OAuth flows and OpenID Connect without really referencing it. But I just think in general it's another area where folks can struggle to sort of understand all that stuff. And you can go out to Microsoft Docs and read other just articles on OpenID Connect, and you can still sort of scratch your head on that stuff. So
yeah. That's a big thing as well. The protocols, OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0.
Yeah.
And that's a natural step to my own blog, maybe, because I'm looking into how the PRT actually works on our devices and how they works on different platforms. So maybe I should put up my own little blog post. So I just removed myself over here. There we go. So this blog post is gonna be called The Mysterious Life of the PRT. So this is me educating myself actually. I have been doing some digging into the Valve 2.0 and OpenID, but this is also for me to like get a better understanding of how it actually works on different platforms. So when I was digging into this one, I saw, yeah. By the way, I made like a mysterious intro to it. Um, yeah, having fun with the words. That's one of the funnier things you can do with this as well. Uh, Instead of just talking about cold IT, you know. But yeah, I made this one, that one. So primary refresh tokens in multi-platform authentication, and I saw there was some kind of connection between all the platforms with on the left side. So this one on the left was probably the most hard thing to figure out what it should be called because it needs to go across every platform. So digging out a lot of pages of documentations, understanding how Windows actually worked with authentication. It was the start of it, and then it just evolved over to Android Enterprise and the iOS and Mac OS. So putting the wording on the left side took me some time, but when I saw that just mapping into my table, I saw a connection between all of them, and then I just thought, okay, I can make a table out of this one. So this is just a reference to myself actually for my other blogs I'm gonna make.
I think this is also awesome. I mean, I found when you're trying to teach people this stuff and you reference a lot of, Microsoft docs, right there's sometimes maybe a bit loose as far as terminology goes, and people understanding what a PRT versus a refresh token versus sometimes you just see token, and yeah, I think your part about having to learn about Windows as well, in particular with like how authentication works in there is you must have spent a lot of time gathering all this.
Yeah, I did.
And also, I think sometimes customers do love to understand the short form of the explanation rather than the long form. They can get lost in the word sometimes. Yeah, so this is really good. Yeah.
A lot of the time, the decision makers don't have time to learn and understand it. They're just there to make a yes or no on something. So having a chart that they can quickly reference will make their life easier, as well as you as the person doing the project for them.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, that's also one of the things why, because it's easier to like talk about the same thing in a way when you have something you can reference to. Yeah, so that's my blog post. Took me some time, fun to make. Had some like, okay, that's how it works. Okay, yeah, but the
I'm
PLC.
curious.
Sorry, Eric?
Oh, I was just going to ask Jonas for like a lot of the information in here. Were you able to ultimately like gather it from just Microsoft Docs, or did you have to go off onto like other sources, like from Apple and Android? Like,
Yeah, I did. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was reading the white papers from Apple and Android to figure it out. And when I saw the connection with the primary storage system and the secondary storage system, it also kind of it started to make sense that I could find different pieces in different docs. Because actually Microsoft haven't written how it actually deep down works. But I could see what they were trying to do with Windows, because when they're doing like they did with Windows, it's pretty much maps over to all the other platforms. Pretty much, it's just called something else. So when I saw that, it just took traction. So I need to figure out what was the secondary secure storage system on Android and iOS and Mac, and yeah.
And I think also going back to Eric's post, of course, sometimes the posts can be really long as well, but that means we just try to, understand the issue properly and, write everything that we know. And sometimes later when we are discussing that with a customer or with someone else, we know where to connect all the dots because we already have found, like some sort of a solution and wrote about it already. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just one of the harder things to like get your own ideas out on paper.
Yeah.
It can be a challenge sometimes. So let's go to the last subject. This one gonna be I think. That's okay. Number matching. And I know, Lewis, you were the one that said this in the beginning of our pre-conversations.
Yes.
And can you tell me a little bit what your thoughts was about it?
Yeah, so we've talked about this quite a lot. I think we've probably mentioned it in every podcast so far because it's a change that if you leave it on Microsoft Managed, it should now be live. That is assuming you're getting your users to use the MFA app, the Microsoft Authenticator MFA app. And if you aren't, there are tools in there to get people up to that level. So you can use an MFA registration campaign and set a deadline to bring people up to using it. And then you can also migrate from legacy MFA methods to the new one, which is all based in the Azure portal. And my take on that is as long as you've matched up what you've got in the old place in the new place, so that's from the 365 admin portal, where the UI looks a bit old and it's per user and you get enabled and forced. As long as you match up your methods and you're happy with those in Azure, you can hit the bottom switch once everyone's got the completed their campaign to be on the level you want them to be, and then just honor the new methods. I think a lot of people might be hesitant to move straight away because that was also the place you would put the IP addresses in for MFA exclusions. If you've got those, it's time to review if they're relevant or not, because in a true, and this might be a buzzword, but in a true zero trust world, you don't often need IP exclusions anymore. If you've got Windows Hello and that's your authentication, and the user's using the same device and nothing changes really in their workflow, why do you need to have the exceptions in place? Be interested to know what you guys think about that.
Oh, I mean, I have lots of, well, I'd say opinions. I mean, I agree with the exclusions for IPs. One thing I didn't know with that, well, up until maybe the past year or so, is even for folks that maybe need them for something, you're better off putting them in named locations because then identity protection can also reference them. So, but then I've seen some things where you might not be calling them in conditional access, but if say you want identity protection to like know your virtual desktop farm is like safe or something like that, you can drop them in there. But no, you're spot on, and people need to stop just sort of right. You have your IP range, and it's just like implicit trust with that, which is the opposite of zero trust. So
yeah, and I don't know the implications of this, but in theory, if you had an employee that worked at your office all the time and they didn't have access to a computer outside of it, and that was a safe zone, that user would never have to complete MFA to do their work, would they? That to me seems a bit scary.
yeah, and I mean, because I think like especially probably as the pandemic hit. I mean, I recall maybe it was before the pandemic, scenarios where I'd go to a customer and they would have basically set up to like new employees don't have to register for MFA until they're outside of some corporate network boundary, and then you'd have this issue where it may be a slim window, but like a threat actor might be able to hop onto their account outside of that network and actually register, multi-factor as that user. So yeah, because internally they're just not being prompted for it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the scenarios I've seen recently is where they've put the exclusions in place because historically something is not set up in such a way where the user's being prompted for MFA every day after lunch, but that's a problem that needs solving. It's not your policies aren't configured correctly if that's what's happening, or there's something wrong with the device relationship that's causing that. I don't think excluding the IP is the way to go.
No, I agree. Exclusions on IPs in a trusted environment is yeah, you shouldn't exclude any IPs unless there could be like a service account or I don't know, something about that. But in the normal day-to-day work, you shouldn't be having exclusions on IPs. And if you have exclusion IPs, it's because you're pretty much satisfying your users' needs and their call for help. I hate doing MFA prompts and all of that, but it's pretty much because you have set up your CA policies wrong, to be hard. But as you said, Eric, you talked about identity protection, and I totally agree with that. If you have identity protection, you should pretty much implement your conditional access policies to use that AI tool. Because that will pretty much help you address MFA fatigue, right? Because you have the AI robot in the back deciding if you're coming from a sign-in risk policy or user risk, if you're in a user risk policy on the level in the point system, or if you're coming in from a sign-in area that is not marked as a trusted location, as you also said with the name locations. You should pretty much leverage identity protection. Some good points.
Yeah. It all comes back to the same thing, right? It's a lot of these IT issues are actually people issues. You have to manage expectation, train them, and get them to adopt the new way of secure working, which surprisingly, the people most resistant to it are the C-levels and the ones that are actually targeted, and they've got public information on LinkedIn, and through some open source intelligence gathering, it wouldn't take long to try and impersonate them. But yeah, those guys should not be dictating security policy. It should be they should be trusting their IT teams and their managers to do that for them, and that's what keeps their company safe and ultimately their income. So
just make sure you exclude your break glass accounts from any MFA type stuff.
As well, yeah, I'm with you.
We all tried that one, right? Forgetting a service account. Something broke. Damn it.
Oh yeah, directory sync. Yeah, I've done it before.
Yeah.
On the subject of break glass, I mean the way that I've seen it recommended recently is that you have like a YubiKey as your second auth. So you've got password in a vault somewhere, YubiKey in another vault. Use those two, and that's how you get into that break glass.
Don't YubiKeys have limited battery life though?
They're not.
Imagine you don't need it for 5 years. You fish out the safe and it's flat and you're knackered.
Do they have batteries in them? I don't know. I thought they were powered by the port.
Yeah, there's no.
The hardware keys.
Oh, okay. I've got
They've not got
wireless.
screens.
I've got
Yeah,
wireless.
probably powered by the port. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a wireless one. The battery's gone on it.
Oh,
Okay, you have a YubiKey with a battery in it? Does that
It's a-
exist?
Yeah, it was a FIDO one.
Okay.
It's got like Bluetooth and stuff in it, but the battery lasts 3 minutes. So
like one of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those.
Yeah,
I had
battery.
one of those.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. You have. Didn't know there was a YubiKey with Bluetooth in it. Okay. Crazy.
Oh, there's a whole. If you go to FIDO2reviews.com, I'll plug my other site where I've actually I've tested like 23 something FIDO2 keys, but
which one do you use then?
I usually just end up using YubiKey. I don't want to sound like I'm like vendor biased because the site I'm trying to not be, but now my daily driver right now is a YubiKey. So
let's just explore something about YubiKeys, right? So there's a scenario in which in my head I'm thinking if you let your users use this as the second and the only secondary MFA challenge, if the user leaves that in their laptop and their laptop is taken away, does that for you increase the risk, and does that make it not viable?
I mean, yeah, if they leave it in the laptop, then you might as well not have one.
But that's my
I mean,
my fear. If you gave YubiKeys out and said, right, this is what we're doing, and it's like, well, they just leave it in all the time because it lets them log in quicker.
we still need your PIN for it, though, right? I mean, most of the stubby ones, right? It's like the capacitive touch to just like sort of prove that someone's there. But I mean, if you're
Mm.
still needing a pin,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the
PIN is also
biometric
unique for
one.
computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you get a biometric one with a fingerprint.
Oh,
That
right,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that those existed. That's quite cool.
Yeah, this one is only for if there's someone there, right? It's only take a touch on the right and left side, right? This
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
that
Or
one-
on the bigger ones, that little the YubiKey Y there on them. But yeah, the one you're on is a biometric, which you don't have to enroll biometrics on them just because they support it. And like Hello for Business, your PIN is still valid as well. But no, I actually started this. I was working with a finance company who they were using smart cards, and they were heavily interested in going to FIDO 2 because they were trying to get rid of like ADFS and kind of just go all native within Azure AD. And there wasn't CVA out there yet. And I found a lot of folks would try to be like, we want a FIDO 2 key to be like the same as a smart card. But I mean, for the most part, most of them, the form factor is different and whatnot. So yeah, I kind of went down this path of just starting to hoard these things and test them out. But
It's a nice looking page. It's
Yeah.
quite extensive.
and I have more in the works, but also too, I think with Andrew talking about the battery, it's kind of funny in a way because I actually tend to find that the simplest ones are easier to use. Like some of the Bluetooth keys, and I mean the NFC keys, depending on how they work, aren't bad either. But yeah, some of the keys with all the bells and whistles and stuff, it's actually like it's just like like all these fancy things that don't actually really do much for you. So
that one had both biometrics and Bluetooth. Okay.
yeah.
So do they charge when they're being used? Or does it just run out?
So it's
You've got
these are all. I mean, it's all over the place. Like this thing charges with a flip out USB thing. This one actually, this Auth-N trend one, it's a very hokey thing to use. So probably not a good specimen.
Okay.
I just feel like
I've got a Fashion one. Is it Fashion? And you've got a USB-C it to charge it up.
Yeah. I did a review for Fission as well, like some time ago.
I feel like giving these to end users and saying you have to charge this before you can log in, that's just going to make them go, well, why am I using this?
Yeah.
I like the idea that it was I could use it on my phone and my laptop, but
Yeah.
it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the Bluetooth piece is definitely more geared towards mobile, like supporting mobile devices, but also like with Windows, anyways. At least as far as like I've known or seen, you run into that issue, right, where if you're like trying to give this to someone and they're if they're a multi-device worker, like the Bluetooth thing just sort of really goes downhill quick because you're going to have to register the key on every device, and then it gets into, well, you need some other way to authenticate before being able to pair it.
But that's another thing. I was actually doing a Windows Hello project last week, I think. Yeah, last week. And I was surprised at how non-native it is to actually enforce that you need to log in with Windows Hello for Business. There's the custom policies you can implement, and then remove the password backend. But should it really be like non-native? Are we not at a point where it should be native to just rely on Windows Hello for Business?
I mean, with that, I've seen, I think there's a lot of, well, it ends up being like app support. I mean, on the Windows device, But I know what you're talking about, Jonas. Like in basically forcing the person to have to only use Hello for Business and not be able to fall back to their password.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Honestly, I've not really had organizations, in my experiences, get to the point of wanting to enforce Hello for Business. It's usually just more like, right. I mean, it works well, so people usually don't have any desire to use their password. It's kind of like
Mm.
good enough.
Blended with the password, yeah. So you can use the password, or you can just select from the login screen, sort of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But once you press
Yeah.
select the pin, it's more like you are always using it, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was just surprised that, like, coming from an environment where you have password, you're logging in with passwords, and then now you want to do like Windows Local Business, but there was no way of like, enforcing it. Yes, it prompts the users, set it up, but they could eventually just fall back to the password and just do that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're hybrid, I mean, right? You could enable Skrill on their user account in Active Directory, which is going to have AD start managing their password for them, like with smart cards. But it's actually before we got on this morning, I saw something that Fabian Bader had tweeted out where he looks like he's looking at something interesting with Skrill that would maybe make people not want to enable it on their accounts. But yeah, if it's a cloud only user, there's no way to say like don't use their password. Again, I think maybe you could go set it to something they don't know and remove them from SSPR or whatnot. But
What is Skrill? Sorry.
it's smart card required for interactive logon.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a throwback in Active Directory to basically when you had smart cards as a way to force people to have to only use their smart card for a while. They couldn't use their password, and it becomes unknown. And now with like 2016 and later, there's a flag you can set where basically, Active Directory on whatever you have your password policy set to, AD will actually just rotate the user's password to some like 128 character random string to kind of satisfy, right? Like if you had regulatory requirements for password rotation, but the user doesn't know what their password is. But
Yeah.
I've never really seen people at scale like use it in like Hello for Business scenarios. So
It seems like such a box ticking exercise if there's a requirement that the user rotates their password because some framework says they have to, or they won't get insurance. That just seems crazy to me.
yeah, well, no, I would agree. I worked for a company that was I worked at a place that I don't even know if we had a regulatory requirement, but it was interesting because we were doing Hello for Business and we still had a 45-day password expiration policy. And every 45 days, you'd have to remember what your password was.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I had someone, a third party, to go in and check out the Intune portal and install the password policy, and it was like, this is not compliant with our rules, blah blah blah. And then I said, but it's an Azure AD environment, and that password policy has no effect on Azure AD accounts. It only have effects on local user accounts. Then the fuss started.
I don't know.
CIS still insist on password expiry, don't they?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the only thing, if I understood you correctly, actually, the only thing you can do with the Azure AD password is the expiration date. If it's an Azure AD only environment, yeah.
And I don't know if any of you guys have seen in Hello rollouts as well, where customers will want to basically apply like password policy logic to the pin, right? They'll either be like, I want to expire the pin, or I want it to be as complex as a password. And you're like, no, you're making it worse.
Yeah.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong. When you have the passwords hash synchronization set up with the Azure AD connector. And let's say when the actual password has been expired on the local AD, that's not transpires back to the Azure AD, right? They can still log in with the same password. Have you guys seen that?
I think you can set it to pick it up, but out the box it doesn't.
Okay.
Doesn't it, if I remember correctly, doesn't it sync up the new password?
Yeah, but if your password's expired on-prem, it will still work in the cloud, but you won't be able to authenticate on-prem with it.
Oh, it's the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
The
Yeah.
disable would work. Yeah, if you disable the AD account, that will block access on the Azure AD.
Yeah, but yeah, Andrew, I think you're to your point that there is the thing you can go configure to flow like password expiration out that will
Yeah.
change that behavior. But
You'd think it'd be there by default, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah, probably should be. Yeah.
Okay, guys. So I'm gonna call it here on this one. On this note, it has been a pleasure to have all of you here. We had some good talks here at the end. That was great. And so shout out to all of you, and hope to see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you
all.
all. Have a good day.